So 5 weeks ago, we started this incredible journey of the series called 9 Months Later. And it's been quite a ride. I know that I've learned a lot. I hope that you feel the same way. And throughout the series, what we learned was parenting, how to parent God's way, right? Parenting God's way. And along the way, we took a look at this portion of Scripture referred to as a love chapter, 1 Corinthians 13. And we looked at how it informs our lives in the way that we parent, but also how it informs our lives in the way that, just in our own Christian living. And we went verse by verse, and we went kind of phrase by phrase even sometimes when the verses were really packed. And we started in verse 4, and we started with this phrase, love is patient. Love is patient. And we spent a whole week dedicated to this short phrase, these 3 words, right? This short phrase, love is patient. And today, on week 6, we're ending in verse 8 in just a moment. Because when it comes to parenting, the thought of having a child can be really, really exciting. I remember before Crystal and I had kids, just kind of the thought of raising kids and having a kid, it was kind of like there was a little bit of a thrill in it. But after all the romance is over, after all the pregnancy stuff is over, after all of that, you realize that you have someone else's life in your hands. Now, my name's Nathan. I'm the lead pastor here at Ridgeline, and I'm excited to be with you today as we conclude this series we've been in that we started 5 weeks ago today. This is part 6, and so, but I want to say Happy Palm Sunday, everyone. Happy Palm Sunday. What a great Sunday. We celebrate the triumphant journey of Jesus down through Jerusalem, and I've walked through the old towns of Jerusalem, and it might have been a lot of these same places where Jesus went on this day. And what an amazing opportunity to kind of just to celebrate. Of course, we're leading up 1 week to Easter. And so we talked about Easter a couple of weeks ago, and we've been talking about it every week since a little bit. And so I just want to talk about just a couple of things when it comes to Easter that has to do with all of us, okay? Understand that when we get kind of these holiday Sundays, Easter, Christmas, whatever, this is a we thing, not a me thing, okay? I can't do it all, and I think, that would be unhealthy for us as a church if I tried, right? This taking care and loving people that come through our doors next Sunday, this is a we thing, not a me thing. And so let me encourage you to be intentional. Be intentional next Sunday. Don't just walk by people you don't know, or don't just, whatever. Be intentional, ask people their name and ask them how they're doing and ask them, those types of things. Another thing that would be amazing would be just come a few minutes earlier than you normally come. Unless you come late, then come way earlier than you normally come, okay? Come a little bit earlier. Hang out in the lobby. Hang out in here. And be intentional just to be around people and to meet people. And be friendly. I know we're a friendly church, and I don't feel like I have to harp on this one, but be friendly. If you want, come just to greet. And I know we have an amazing First Impressions team, but on some of the bigger Sundays, it's just a blessing to come and to be another hand that somebody can shake, or another hello, or another high five, or whatever. And here's what I've always kind of envisioned for us as a church. I don't ever want to see a new family, a new person, a new whatever, sit by themselves unless they just want to. And so ask somebody, if you don't know them, ask them to sit with you. And even if you're on stage or you have a different role for part of the service or whatever, it's okay to go, hey, I play bass guitar here at Ridgeline, and so I'm going to be sitting right here. If you'd love to sit with me, that would be great. I'll be up on stage during the music, but I'll be right back down after it's all done. Sit with me. Ask people to sit with you. And then we talked about this kind of invitation strategy. We talked about decide, adopt, invite, and bring. We're at 4 steps. And so a couple of weeks ago, we decide which part of your community you want to adopt. And so for me, we adopted the floor that we live on, because we live in an apartment, and the floor that is above us. And so we adopted those. And then we've been in our adoption week, which was this past week. Every time we walked through there, we prayed, or at least tried to remember to pray. We prayed for them, probably all of my neighbors and the people who live in my apartment complex in that building, dozens of times. Every time we walk through, God, I pray that they would come to know you. God, I pray that you give me the opportunity to invite them to church at Easter. God, I pray, divine encounters, that kind of thing. And so do that. Now, this week, what we're doing this week is the invite week. This is the invite week. And so on your way out this morning, we have invite cards for you. You can take as many as you think you'll need. Take them if you're going to use them, okay? And give them out. And what will happen, what I believe is going to happen this week, is all the divine encounters that we've prayed for over the last couple of weeks, or this past week, we'll see this week. And so keep these on you, carry them, keep them in your car, keep them, on your person, throw them in your purse or your wallet or, whatever. And so keep all of these handy. And so that next Sunday is, of course, the last step, and that's bring. And in bring, feel free to meet somebody beforehand. Say, hey, you want to meet for coffee first? Or, hey, you want to meet at the corner of our neighborhood? Or, hey, you want to... And that way they're not walking onto the property cold. They're not walking onto, awkward. If I had time, I would tell you a story about the first time I went to Ridgeline Church and the feeling of going to a new church, even though I'd been in pastoral ministry for several years and all that, the feeling of going cold and how overwhelming it was, especially when I had kids and my wife was sick that day and all that. So, bring. That's the last one. So here we go. Let's close out the series. Let's look at verse 8. Here it is. Ready? Love never fails. Love never fails. One of the ways that I feel like that we fail our kids the most as parents is in the area of sex, technology, and social media. One of the ways that I feel like we fail our kids the most is our unwillingness, or our nervousness, or our kind of like we allow the fact that it's uncomfortable, all of those things. We allow that to we don't really need to talk about it quite yet or whatever. We fail our kids in these areas because we don't talk to our kids about sex, tech, and social media. And if you had good parents growing up, you probably had the talk, right? How many remember the talk when they were growing up? Anybody? Yeah. And that's if you had good parents. You probably were, and when you had the talk, by the time you had the talk, you were probably old enough that you had most of it figured out already, right? The talk came pretty late in your teenage years, and the talk was awkward. It was always awkward. I'm not sure why. It's not how it could be so awkward, but it was. There was never eye contact during the talk. Okay, it just wasn't, and it was kind of like it was made up to be a big deal, and you never talked about it again. You had this one event, it was a big deal, and then it was over. You had the talk, and that was it. And that's if you had good parents, or maybe because of your family dynamics, there was never really a talk. There was never really this discussion about sex and sexuality. There was never this discussion about, and I know in our generation it's a little bit different, but tech and for folks that are older than me, this tech and social media, and that really wasn't a thing. But whatever the kind of the relevant talks were of the day, it was kind of because of family dynamics. Maybe there was never really a talk. And I would say, don't worry, you didn't miss much. But if you're a parent. If you are a parent, you know that someday you're going to have one of these talks. And for a lot of us, it's scary and it's awkward and we're nervous because we don't have a great example on how to do this well. But we have to do it because love never fails. And here's why it matters. Your kids will talk to you, or kids will talk to us about the things we talk to them about. Kids will talk to us about the things we talk to them about. And subsequently, they won't talk to us about the things we don't talk to them about. They won't do it. And I know some of us are thinking, yeah, but my kid is not 16 yet, or listen, that's not an excuse. That's not an excuse. In fact, as we'll talk about in a little bit, 16 is way old for the beginning of some of these discussions. And here's why it matters. Here's why it's so important. Teens today view not recycling as a bigger issue than pornography. At least I recycle, Okay. Teens are mostly viewing porn out of boredom. That's different from the way that a lot of times, folks that are older in our generation and older generations viewed pornography. It was out of a sense of hurt, or it was out of a sense of void or loneliness or whatever. There was a desire for connection, and there's not even a desire for connection. 51% of women under 25 admit to actively pursuing pornography online, which means that they went looking for it, not that they happened to stumble upon it. 81% of guys admit to actively pursuing pornography online. 50% of teens admit to sending sexually explicit messages. And because their cell reception is so good, 50% of teens admit to receiving a sexually explicit message. The talk matters. The talk matters. Now, I know some of us are going, well, yeah, well, not my kid. I mean, my kid would never, we raise our kid, but on average, from teenagers, 13 to 18 years of age, spend about 71 hours a week in front of media and or technology. That's almost 2 full-time jobs. They spend in front of media and technology. And so there's a huge chance that they'll see something, they'll stumble upon something, they'll find something that they were never meant to see. There's a huge chance. And we have to do better as parents. And so I want to talk about 6 starting points for talking to your kids. Here's number 1. And let me just say, you do something. You may find, well, you've got all 6 of these and that's not for you or whatever, but do something. Do something. And maybe, you start with 1 or 2 and you work your way up, but do something. You and your spouse talk first. Number 1, you and your spouse talk first. Chances are, if the topic is off limits with your spouse, it's not something you're going to talk to your kids about. If it's off limits between the 2 of you, it's not just going to be an open conversation between you and your child. And here's what I think is important. To talk first so you're on the same page. See, chances are you've never talked about it before because it's never come up before. I know a lot of times with Crystal and I, it's like we make decisions after we realize there was an issue. But learn to not do that in this area. What parent, discuss things like what parent should talk to which kid first. The dad going to talk with the son, the mom with the daughter. I'm not saying it has to be that way, but just talk about it. Talk about it. So you know what the expectations are. When should both parents talk to the children? When should the whole family talk? Talk about some of these things. Talk about ahead of time. Talk about things like when can they have a cell phone? What type of movies are they allowed to watch? What rating? Answer all of this as best as you can beforehand. And remember, like we talked about a few weeks ago, sometimes it's not an age thing. Well, when they're 13, they can watch PG-13 movie. No, sometimes it's a maturity thing. We have to learn to gauge our kids' maturity level, not just their age. Now, let me say this. If you have a sexual history that you have not dealt with, is still causing you pain or is still in the dark in some way, it will affect your marriage and it will affect the way that you talk to your kids about sex. And so talk about the pornography use. Talk about the sexless marriage. Talk about the trauma. Talk about it all, because it will affect the way that you talk to your kids about sex. Number 2. Don't assume your kid is perfect. Don't assume your kid, now mine are, but don't assume yours better be. Just kidding. We'd all love to think that our kids are perfect. We'd all love to think that. I'd love to think that. But their accolades don't mean anything when it comes to this area of their life. Just because they get straight A's doesn't mean anything when it comes to these areas of their life. Just because they're in advanced classes, or they go to youth group, or they've been water baptized, or they serve, or they love Jesus, doesn't mean that they're not dealing with some of these issues. They are still just as susceptible to seeing things online that they shouldn't see as anyone else. And just because, this is important, just because they have found something online doesn't mean they know everything. Just because they found something doesn't mean they know everything. I heard a great story this week about, it was a young a girl, 8 or 9 years old, who had found pornography online, and then her mom was so devastated. She's like, now she knows everything. She doesn't know anything. Because what they've seen shows nothing about what real sex is all about. In fact, an industry that is filled with blue pills and fake orgasms has probably very little to teach us about sex. Very little. And don't assume that you have to talk to your son and not your daughter. Well, I'm going to talk to my son when he's 8, but I'll wait till my daughter's 14. Don't assume, and don't delay it. Don't assume. While your daughter may not be interested as early of an age as your son is, the boys around her in her class or at school or wherever on her teams or wherever she hangs out, they are. They are. And so talk to her. Number 3. Have the talk sooner rather than later. Have the talk sooner rather than later. Now, if you're here and your kid is, my kid's 15 now. You're not off the hook. We'll get to that. But for those of you with kids, let's say between the ages of 5, 6, 7, 8, begin the process. Begin the process. There should be no such thing as the talk. It should be a series of talks that start now, or start when they're young, start in this age range, all the way up until they're adults, and for as long as they want to keep talking to you about it. And if you're a parent, here's how I would define a win in some of these areas. If you're a parent, here's what I would say. I would say, if as a parent you talk to them about it first, you win. If you talk to them about it first, you win. If you talk about pornography first, they don't hear about pornography from another classmate, man, that's a win. If you give them the sex talk first, they don't hear about it from somebody else, or overhear it on TV, or find it online, that's a win. That's a one. Here's why. I love this. Because it's easier to define than redefine. It's easier to define than redefine. So what age can you talk to your kids to define and not redefine? And I think you have to kind of ask that based on the different environments you find your kids in or whatever. It's like, man, at what age can I guarantee that I won't be redefining these definitions? And so I'm going to talk to them then. I'm going to talk to them then. Because it won't be long after that they'll see something, or another kid will say something, and you've missed it. You've missed it. And you think, man, this seems young. Like we're talking about like 7, 8, 9-year-old, like we're talking young. I know 11-year-olds addicted to pornography. Addicted, like seriously addicted. It matters. The talk matters. So how do we start the talk? Let's go through a couple things. Start simple. Start simple. Start simple. We did this with our kids when they were young. You're much younger than, even 5. You're a boy. You're a girl. This is what makes you a boy. This is what makes you a girl. God knit you together to be a boy. God knit you together to be a girl. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. God designed you to be you, and there's no other you like you. Just begin to have those types of talks. And then as they're a little bit older, it's okay to ask questions like, hey, do you know what sex is? No. Good. Let's keep it that way. Move on. All right. The second one. Don't make a big deal about it. Now, I know you'd be tempted to do this. Don't do this. Don't make a big deal about it. Don't have notes. Don't go away for the weekend. Don't have charts and graphs. Don't talk. Here's why. Because if the talk happens at an overnight retreat, it stays at that overnight retreat. You're not trying to have the talk. You're opening the door for multiple talks all throughout their teenage years. All throughout as they develop sexually. All throughout as they, grow in the way that they see the opposite sex. All throughout the way that they kind of develop relationships in those directions. Letter C. Don't be afraid of good information. Okay. All right. Don't get mad at me. Don't be afraid of good information. I don't know why this is the case. Tell your kids honestly and accurately what sex is. Define it. Help them actually know and understand. Not just the emotional side of things, the physical side of things. But not just the physical side of things, also the emotional side of things. Be clear. Be clear. Give them a good understanding of what sex is. Clear. Actually tell them. Don't beat around the bush. Okay? And I know sometimes we're going oh man, that's a lot. What's the absolute worst that could happen? If you tell them the honest, biblical truth, the real deal. They might tell somebody at school who then will have good information about sex. That's what else bad could happen? You will have defined something instead of trying to redefine something. Now, we do this with our kids, when we told them about the realities of Santa Claus or, these types of topics is, you may know information that everybody else doesn't need to know, so don't go around telling everybody. Their parents may not have had these talks with them. And that's an okay conversation to have with your kids. And here's the deal. When it comes to sex and the way that we describe it and talk about it with our kids, be careful not to say that it's bad. Make sure you never say it's bad. Sex is not bad. Sex is not wrong. Now, the timing can be bad or wrong, right? And the desired partner can be bad or wrong, as far as if you're 14 in high school and you want to date the quarterback who's 16 and you think it's going to last forever, right? That's wrong. But the act itself, in and of itself, is not bad and it's not wrong. In fact, it's good and it's right. And it's created by God for our enjoyment and our pleasure. And when we say sex is bad or wrong, we attach shame to it that oftentimes does not go away even when the context becomes right. So you say it's bad or wrong, and then the context becomes right, marriage. But there's still this carried guilt. There's still this carried shame when it comes to the topic. And so never identify it as bad or wrong. All right, D. Leave it open-ended. Leave it open-ended. Do you have any questions? It's a great way to end the conversation, or to begin the process of ending the conversation. Say things like, you can come back and talk and ask questions about this anytime. But don't wait for them to come back and talk. Continue to initiate conversations. Okay? All right, here's number 4. Oh, did I miss something? Let's go back. Oh, here we go. Yeah, this is important. So if you miss that window, right? If your kids are older than, 7, 8, 9, 10, you're not off the hook. Your kids will know more at their stage now, and they'll be less open to talk about it. But you still have to be intentional to have the conversations. But you don't have to be an expert on all the latest slang or everything that they're, all the terms or whatever. Just talk. Just make it accessible for them to talk. And have multiple talks. Talk about sex. Talk about pornography. Talk about sexting. Talk about Snapchat. Just because it disappears after 24 hours, whatever it is, like everything else on the internet, it never really goes away. Never really goes away. And get started. Those of you with older teenagers or whatever, get started right away. All right, number 4. Know what your kids do online and offline. Know what your kids do online and offline. 70% of parents have no clue what their kids do online. 70% of parents have no clue what their kids do online. In other words, there's a 70% chance that you are one of those parents. I know, that's good math. 70% of parents have no clue what their kids do online. And for some of us that maybe are a little less techie, this area can be a challenge. It can be hard to kind of figure out. And our kids fix the internet, right? Every time it goes down, hey, will you come reset the thing? I don't even know what it's called. No, but you should know all the passwords. You should know all the passwords. You should know all the passwords. And if this is something maybe that you're not, feel like, I don't really know, like where do I even begin? Let us know. We want to point you in the right direction. We will point you in the right direction to set up protection and accountability on your devices that give you control as a parent. Okay? Know your kid's password. You'd be surprised how many parents don't know the passcode on their kid's phone. Know all of them. Their iTunes password, their Netflix password, whatever it is, their phone passcode. Know all the passcodes. Have location services turned on. It's your phone. You're allowed to do whatever you want with it. You can turn it on if you want. You own the phone. And just because you feel like you'll never be able to control everything doesn't mean you shouldn't control anything. Now, here's our approach. And this may change or adapt as need be, but right now with our kids, our approach is we don't block everything, but we monitor everything. Now, we block a lot, and all adult websites and all that in our on our phones because of the software we use and all that. They all should be blocked, but like our kids still have access to. They can download an app, or they can do, we don't block everything. Now, that could change if the trust is broken or whatever. But we do monitor everything. We get screenshots every day of things that have happened on our kid's phone the previous day, that randomly throughout the day. Know what your kids are doing online and offline. There's 2 more. Number 5, use everyday opportunities to continue the conversation. Use everyday opportunities to continue the conversation. Now, I grew up, my dad was a pastor, and my parents were in ministry most of my whole life, still are. And I remember as a kid or, early adolescent age, a certain ad would come on talk radio geared towards older men. Of course, my parents would change it real fast, Or a similar ad would come on, a commercial would come on TV, and my parents would change it real fast, or the Victoria's Secrets commercials, or whatever, they would change it real fast. And it was like once in a while, they would have to do that. Now today, I feel like we are constantly bombarded with those types of things. I mean, you could be watching something clean and family-friendly, and a questionable commercial comes on, and all of a sudden, it's been seen. There's nothing you can do about it. You can change the channel, but it's still been seen. And what do you do? What do you do in those moments? And here's what we're talking about. Number 4, use everyday opportunities to continue the conversation. Continue these conversations. Ask, hey, what'd you see? What do you think that commercial's about? Why do you think maybe that product is necessary? How did it make you feel when you saw? Just talk about it. Talk about it. And talk about it without making the act of sex bad in and of itself. So don't postpone the conversation. Have the conversation. Kids are going to talk to you about the things that you talk to them about. And when something happens at school, or on the playground, or in the locker room, or at summer camp, they will talk to you. Don't freak out. Don't freak out. They'll stop talking to you if you freak out. Thank them for bringing it up and for talking about it openly. Here's number 6. Here's the last one. Share your values. Share your values. Share your values. Let your kids know why. Let your kids know why. There's the scriptural why, right? Like when we raise godly children, they should have an understanding of, this is why we save sex till marriage. It's not just something fun. It's something that, there's biblical precedent here for this. Because sex is designed for 2 people who have joined themselves in covenant relationship. And so talk about the why, but also the practical why. There's some practical, probably we all have enough stories that we could talk about the practical why you don't do this or why you should do that. There's a practical why. I think your kids deserve it, and the why will be more memorable than the what. Tell them why you don't want them to do X, Y, Z. Tell them why you think that they should wait to do this or that. Tell them why the location services is turned on their phone. Tell them why. The why is important. Don't just be a police or play detective, though. Give them the why. Here's why I don't want you to, whatever. And like we learned a couple of weeks ago, because love always protects, right? Love always protects. We have to learn to protect our kids from pornography. We have to learn to protect our kids from tech and from social that would want to cause them grief in their life. And sometimes love protects fiercely. Sometimes love makes us the bad guy. For some of us that maybe have examples, it's okay to share and say, as the dad, say, here's what I went through and why I don't want you to go through that. Or as the mom, here's my story and what happened to me, and this is why I don't want you to do that. Why I don't want you to hang out with this person. You get involved in this area. Share your values. Tell them this is why. And this is a great starting point for conversations with your kids. And if you're a single parent here, there are some great men and women in our church that would love to help you out in this area. That would love to help you out in this area and partner with you as you parent your kids through some of this. And maybe for some of you, you're here today and you're going like, I don't know if I can do this. It's embarrassing, and we never had the talk. Like, we never talked about this in my house, and this is challenging, and this is frustrating, and I don't know. In John 14, Jesus reveals the Holy Spirit as the helper, and I believe that that's true for us today. That the Holy Spirit will come and help us. He will help us as we raise our kids. He'll help us have opportunities to talk to them about the things that we need to talk to them about. He'll help us have boldness and courage to explain the things that we need to explain. And He'll help us share the why. He will help you. We have to have these conversations, because not having these conversations with our kids sets them up for failure. And love never fails. That's parenting God's way. Let's pray.